The Denver Broncos, as we all know, had a pretty disappointing 2020 season. After ending the 2019 season on a high note, well, they went 5-11, and that was good for 4th in the AFC West. Not only that, but Drew Lock also took a noticeable step back. And today I wanted to talk about the Broncos and what I think they should do in this year's offseason and what's next for them. But before we do get started, if you guys like today's video, make sure you hit that like button as it really helps out the channel. Subscribe if you guys are new and enjoy the content on here so you don't miss out on any new videos. We are also on the road to 500 subscribers and it would mean a lot to me if we could reach that goal, as these videos take a lot of hard work. And as a special, I will react my first 2 videos ever. So if you guys want to see that and enjoy the videos on this channel, make sure to subscribe. And let's hit 500 subscribers. But now, with all that being said, let's get started with the actual video. And let's start out by talking about the Denver Broncos roster. And opening up with the quarterback position, I want to talk about Drew Lock. And unfortunately, he had a sophomore slump, as after ending the 2019 season on a tear, well, he was pretty bad, as he passed for 2,933 yards, only completed 57% of his passes, and tossed only 16 touchdowns. And his future, it is not completely certain in the Mile High City, and who knows what happens to him. Maybe this is just a one bad year, and maybe next year he does turn things around. Either way, let's just hope for the best for Drew Lock. Next up, I want to talk about Phillip Lindsay, and Phillip Lindsay did not have a good season, as he did struggle with injuries, and he only had 502 yards, 1 touchdown, and only averaged 4 yards an attempt. But Phillip Lindsay, I think we all know how good of a player he is when healthy, and I do think next year, if he is healthy, well, he can have a really good year, and he can bounce back. Up next is the second running back, and that is Melvin Gordon. And Melvin Gordon, well, he did a good job of filling in the absence of Phillip Lindsay, as he rushed for 986 yards, 9 touchdowns, and averaged 5 yards a carry. Melvin Gordon and Phillip Lindsay, who know, I guess they might use them both a good amount, but either way, they still got a pretty good running back duo. Next up, I want to talk about Courtland Sutton. Now, as we know, he barely played this season, so I will not include any stats when going over him. But I think we all know how good of a player Courtland Sutton is when healthy. To me, he is going to be this team's #1 receiver, and he's a pretty good player when healthy. And if you ask me, next year, if he plays at least a majority of the season, well, him and Drew Lock, they're just going to be great. Up next, I want to talk about Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy, he did not have a terrible season by any means, but he does have some ways to go in his game. But either way, he had a fine rookie season with 856 receiving yards and 3 receiving touchdowns. Tim Patrick is the next player I want to talk about, and he actually had a really good year as compared to 2019. Well, he just increased his production by a lot, and that was great in the absence of Courtland Sutton. And while it only contributed to 5 wins, he had 742 receiving yards, 6 receiving touchdowns, and caught 65% of his targets. Noah Fant is a final offensive player I want to talk about, and he's a good young tight end who's a pretty good receiving tight end, and he's going to be a really big part of this team if they do end up having some future success. I mean, I expect him to at least, as he had 673 receiving yards, 3 receiving touchdowns, and caught 67% of his passes. Moving on to the defensive side of the Broncos, I want to talk about Bradley Chubb. And Bradley Chubb, he's just one of the best young defensive players in the NFL. And last year, in 2019, he hardly played due to injury, and this year he played a majority of the season. And while he was not crazy good, he still had a solid season with 7.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and 34 pressures. Von Miller is the next player I want to talk about, and even though he is kind of aging, he is still a pretty productive player, and this year he did not really play due to injury, but I do think next year, if he does play, he can still have at least 8.5 sacks, and he can still be a pretty good player. Bryce Callahan is the next player I want to talk about, and he's a pretty good cornerback, and while he did not have eye-popping stats, the guy did not have a very high completion percentage when targeted, and while he is not the best corner in the league by any means, he's still a pretty nice player to have. And the final player I want to talk about is Justin Simmons, and he is a must bring back free agent. I mean, Justin Simmons is one of the best safeties in the NFL and is one of the best, well, he's just one of the best defensive players in the NFL and one of the best players in the NFL, and I would probably say this team's best player. He had 5 interceptions and 9 passes defended this past season. And that will wrap up to the roster for this team. And moving on to the other stuff, the Broncos, as we know, did have a disappointing season. Now, some of it was due to injuries, but Drew Lock was also a very big part of it, as even though he finished 2019 strong, he did not play well this year. Even though he did have a few injuries, he still did not play well. Now, they have been involved a little bit in the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes, and they have been slightly rumored to get him, but they really do need good QB play. And if I'm the Broncos, would I trade for Deshaun Watson? Well, this might be a surprise, but the answer to me is no. I would not trade for Deshaun Watson. And in all honesty, I wouldn't give up on Drew Lock just yet. And I know I'm probably going to get comments criticizing me for that point, and there's probably going to be some dislikes because of that. But here's the thing. You have to be patient with young quarterbacks, okay? Sophomore slumps happen, okay? I mean, not too long ago, people were preaching for the Bills to move on from Josh Allen. Look where he is now. He was an MVP candidate this past year. In 2019, Baker Mayfield had a sophomore slump, and a lot of people were saying the Browns should move on from Baker Mayfield. Look what happened now. Look what happened to those guys, okay? Sophomore slumps are common, and you gotta give young quarterbacks time to develop. And obviously, John Elway, who was the GM of the Broncos at the time of Drew Lock being drafted, has been known to screw up when it comes to drafting quarterbacks. But if you ask me, they still gotta give Drew Lock time. The guy does have right circumstances, but I do think next year, if he does pick things back up, they can be a playoff team. And one of the good things about this year's offseason is that they will have $28 million in cap space. Now, I do think they might cut some guys. I know on the day I'm recording this, they did cut AJ Bouye, who did not have a good season for them, and they definitely got to bring back Justin Simmons, as I said before. I mean, he is the anchor of that defense and is definitely the best player on this team. And if you ask me, if they lose out on Justin Simmons, the team in general is just going to take a big hit. They will also have a team option on Von Miller, and I do think they will probably bring him back, as he is still decently productive when healthy, and the fans also love him, and I'm sure the organization loves him, and I'm pretty sure he likes it in Denver too, as, I mean, the guy, he's really loyal to Denver, and I mean, the fans love him. I know that since I'm from Colorado, and, you know, the people just love him. But if you ask me, I expect them to bring back Justin Simmons and Von Miller, and I wouldn't be surprised if they did cut Kareem Jackson. Justin Simmons, to me, would cost at least 5 to, like, maybe $8-10 million bucks. Now, let's say they do cut Kareem Jackson, that would give them around, well, right now they have around $28 million in cap space, and they should still be able to get decent free agents. I'd expect them to, if I were them, I would target guys like Xavier Rhodes and Mike Hilton if they want to help out in the secondary. Leonard Floyd would also be a pretty good pickup, as the guy had a really good season for the Rams. Bud Dupree also would not be bad, as I don't know if the Steelers will bring him back due to cap space issues for them. Levante David is also a guy I would target, because even though I'm pretty doubtful that he does come there, I mean, he still would not be a bad pickup if he does choose to sign with Denver if they target him. Hassan Reddick also had a really good season. If you ask me, I would definitely try and go after the guy. And on the defensive tackle side, they do need to kind of upgrade there, but Shelby Harris wouldn't be terrible to bring him back if they can't find a defensive tackle, since this defensive tackle class, well, free agency class, it's not great. Maybe they could also go after a guy like Leonard Williams, but obviously they will not get all of those guys, but I do expect them to I would target some of those guys to try and improve your team. And they will also own, I believe, a top 10 pick in this year's draft. So I would also try and improve through the draft, and I expect them to take a cornerback or a linebacker in this year's draft. And some of the draft targets to me include Caleb Farley or Patrick Surtain, or Micah Parsons, or Jeremiah Owusu-Koroma. Hopefully I said that right, to help on the defensive side of the ball. As while they are not terrible, they could always upgrade at corner and the linebacker positions. And maybe later in the draft, they also do choose to address their defensive tackle issues, as they are not great when it comes to interior defensive linemen. And to really wrap up this video, I do not think the Broncos should give up on Drew Lock, okay? I know he had a bad year. I'm not trying to say he was amazing this year, since he was not amazing. But Drew Lock, I mean, you gotta let young players and young quarterbacks develop, and you gotta give them time. And I do think next year, if they can make the right improvements, and if Drew Lock does, play well, then they could easily be a playoff team next year. But that will wrap up today's video. If you guys enjoyed today's video, make sure you hit that like button, as it really helps out the channel and it shows your support for this content. If you guys do watch consistently and enjoy the content on here, make sure to subscribe, as we are on the road to 500 subscribers. You will also not miss out on any new videos, and as a special, I will react to my first 2 videos ever. So if you guys want to see that and enjoy the content on here, make sure to subscribe. But with that being said, I'm out, you guys.